Welcome to the Practical Church Revitalization Podcast with our co-hosts Don McKinnon and Eric Malloy, where we look at church revitalization in real time.
Okay, welcome back to the Practical Church Revitalization Podcast. I'm Don McKinnon, and I'm here with
Eric Malloy, and we are in the bunker, recording episode number 2. Those of you subscribed, you know what we're talking about. Those of you don't, we're at First Church, right down the hill from the Bunker Hill Monument. So, welcome back. Glad to have you guys.
Okay, and today we're going to talk about something that every church, not just a revitalization, but every church needs to be doing. It is part of our first ministry, I guess you would call it, as pastors, and that would be that we have a call to discipleship. Jesus really just lays it out for us in Matthew 28:18 through 20, and this is actually like burned right into my my Bible because it just opened up to it. This is if you ever First Baptist Church of Sutton and you walk out our main exit, as it would be, you will see you are now entering the mission field, and it has Matthew 28:18 to 20 as its verse. And this is what it says. It says, "And Jesus came and said to them, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." So there you go. That is the Great Commission. That is the commission that all churches have. But sadly, in a revitalization, a lot of those churches became inwardly focused instead of outwardly. And so when we get into revitalization, the first thing that we need to do is we need to make that church fall back in love with Jesus. And 10 months now at First Baptist Church of Sutton, that is what I've been doing on Sundays from the pulpit. I meet with the men once a month now for 4 or 5 months, and my wife with the women. And that has been something that we've been seeing. We actually, last week, I actually had one of my members come up to me and say, Pastor, now when I drive by people, I'm starting to think to myself, where are they going? Do they know about Jesus? This is the thing. They are starting to become outwardly focused. And one of the ways you do that, before I give the mic over to Reverend Malloy, is going to be, we do a lot of our discipleship from the pulpit, but when you can, you do small groups. You got to think of Jesus as a model. Jesus would preach to the multitudes. Then he had the 120. Then he had the 12. And then he did a personal one-on-one time with Peter, James, and John. And so in many cases, Jesus, the Bible shows us that a lot of the growing church methods where they use those things, that is biblical. That works. And that's what we need to do. I think some of my most fun times right now is like if I'm able to go out for coffee with somebody and really get to know them, talk to them one-on-one, understand where they are. I get an idea of, just where they are in their walk and what I need to do to get them to go further, what I need to do to get them to become a leader in the church. Discipleship, though, for us right now is really not just the pulpit, but small groups, and that's where we're starting to see a lot of good movement right now, I think.
That's what's funny is my Facebook memories. I just had something pop up. We used to just have one community group. That's what we call our small groups. We don't have Sunday school. We meet during the week, and we met on Wednesday nights. And it started off. We actually had to shut it down for a whole summer. We were joking about this the other day. We only had one other person who occasionally comes. She was going through nursing school, so if you guys know anything about that, nursing school is insane. So the fact that she came ever was pretty great. But we had to shut it down for a whole summer because it was literally my family having dinner at the church. And so we just, a couple of years ago, we shut it down for the summer, and then we came back, and man, God just really blessed us. he sent a couple young men, and I have a young guy who's actually our director of discipleship and community groups now. And he took over leading that one, and I started a new one on Monday nights. And I'm not, here's the thing is, and this is what you guys, if you're listening, maybe this is what you want to hear, because I think sometimes we all look for that magic button, like, hey, if I just do this, my church is going to grow.
Yeah. The magic pill.
By the way, this isn't the magic bullet. But we started a second community group. And man, there's some weeks we're high. We have tons of people at both. And there's some weeks, like this past week, we have like 7 people in community group for the week. It's just, and that's small church life. If you're trying to come back, is that, when 1 or 2 people are missing, man, it's really impactful. Like I know we have spring break coming up. My family's I'm actually going to teach at a partner church in Tennessee. So my family will be gone, and then I know we have a couple other families will be gone, and so we'll really see a significant dip in attendance. And it's tough sometimes, but you're right. We've seen. I tell that story. Wow, I just banged my mic. I tell that story to say we've seen God do so much great stuff through the ministry of our community group. As our community group grows, I really feel like with as far as small groups goes, our small group goes, our church goes, not just goes, but grows. Like as our small group goes, our church goes, because that's really where we get an opportunity to invest and to build relationships. I tell people that from the pulpit all the time. All of our chairs face the same direction. Well, actually, now we kind of have a little bit of an angle, so quite the exact same direction. But we all, everybody's looking forward except for me, who's looking at them. And there's not a lot of one-to-one interaction. And I tell people all the time, you want to get in to you want to get involved in discipleship. You have to get involved in people's lives. We challenge mentors. Everybody needs a mentor. Everybody needs to be mentoring someone. If you're a believer, when Jesus talks about making disciples, well, a disciple is someone who's reproducing themselves. But you also have to be being discipled yourself. We have a mutual friend in Jim Harold who runs Overseed. Man, that guy gets a ton. He got about 3 shout outs at last episode.
Yep.
That guy gets a ton. We might have to have him on.
I think that's a future podcast we got.
I think we're gonna have him on one day. But Jim's great. And anyways, he's definitely a guy I look to in a mentoring, just because he's a guy who's been there. And so we look for him, and then we look to reinvest ourselves in other people. And God's been good to us, and I have a couple of young guys who God sent who feel called to ministry that I'm able to spend some time investing in and seeing grow in their relationship with Jesus and in their leadership ability. We have a couple young ladies as well, but I tend to shy away from discipling young ladies who I'm not married to or who aren't my daughter. So, but as a pastor, there is still I still have to invest in my leaders.
Yep.
Of course, with respect to boundaries and stuff like that. So, it has been for us. It's been an incredible experience.
Yeah, with us, and we're a lot younger in the plant, in the planning stages than you.
So, those of you guys who were just tuning in for the first time, I'm entering year 4.
Yeah.
And Don's
almost a year.
Almost to hit 1 year. So I hit my 3-year mark is in July. It'll be a 3-year anniversary. So we'll be starting year 4.
Yep, and my 1-year mark starting year 2 will be June. So
right, I knew it was close because I remember I was talking to Terry Dorsett from the Baptist Convention.
Yeah,
who was telling me about you. So.
And that's another podcast.
Yeah, we'll have to have that guy on.
Yeah, he's a good guy. All right, so so. My steps right now, like when we first started, and I cast the vision out there for them, that was one of the things. And they were like, "Oh, you mean Bible study?" And I'm trying to explain to them, not quite. Like one thing about community groups that for some of you out there who, depending on where you are in your level of church life, maybe you're realizing you are in need of doing a revitalization. You hear the term community group, small group, growth group, life group. It goes by a bunch of different names. basically it is Bible study, but it's more. It's doing life together. It's really getting together, enjoying one another's company, getting to know each other, becoming true family. You know what it is to really be family in the church, and many groups go out there. One thing that I love reading about is how churches that are in a pattern of growth themselves, as they're reproducing, and so the church is now like 100 people, and they've got 4 or 5 groups. Those groups themselves are actually meeting and saying, what can we do for the community in the name of the church? In the name of God. And so you might go to a church and you find out that the Tuesday night group is actually going to be serving down at the homeless shelter, serving food. And that's something that they're doing, and it's not so much tied into the church, but it's where they're growing. They're understanding more of how it is to be a disciple and what Jesus means. So we're at a point where right now, because of life the way it is, I've got a Tuesday night group at my church, which is supposed to be a community group. We call them growth groups, but we only have one person right now on Tuesdays. But that person really needs it. That person's really growing. That's the person that said to me and my wife, I'm driving by, I'm seeing these people, do they know God? And that's great. And then Saturday mornings, once a month, I'm meeting with the men. I got 2 of the men that come out to that. One of them is actually the husband of that person, the woman that said that. He's growing. Natalie meets with the women, and pretty much all the women show up from the church for that.
That's awesome.
So that is where we are. But one thing you have to be is flexible. Mark Clifton, who Mark, if you're listening, please, I know you have my number. Give me a call. No.
Wow. That was a little desperate, man.
No, but I mean, we're giving him a lot of shout out. By the way, we're gonna do. Man, your pipes are popping again.
Yeah, it freaks people out.
But anyway, we're gonna talk about resources out there. One of our biggest resources for us has been Revitalize and Replant with Dr. Tom Rayner and Mark Clifton, who is the director of revitalization and replanting for the North American Missions Board, which Eric and I are affiliated with. So that's why we mention him, because he's got a lot of knowledge. He's got many years of ministry experience, but that's one of the things he talks about: tactical patience. And it's like tactical patience for 2 military guys that are talking to you right now is something that you have to pick and choose when you're going to do something, how you're going to do it, and how you're going to implement it. Many times you want to get something done right away. It's like ripping the Band-Aid out or just slamming the door on the bad tooth. Other times you want to do it, but if you do it, you're going to create a storm that you're not ready to go through. So you got to just pick and choose those battles. And but in other instances, it's how are you best going to win? How are you best going to do more by either doing less or doing something that just doesn't make sense? And for a lot of people, they look at my wife and I, and we didn't get to this in episode 1, but my wife and I, we live in Taunton, Massachusetts. We pastor in Sutton, Massachusetts. That is 50 miles away. Part of the reason why we haven't gotten out there is it is very expensive to move out there. The other thing is we've taken a lot of our money that we would have invested in getting a place out there and put it back into the church. We're investing it in where we know it has to be spiritually.
Right.
So you talk about tithes and offerings. This is going up and beyond in that.
Well, not only that, but if you're listening from another part of the country, you have to understand how expensive Massachusetts is. I mean, in general. I mean, of course, you're in a rural community. We're in Charlestown, which is one of the most expensive communities in in Boston. I mean, we're not Bunker Hill, but you have multi-million-dollar homes 2 blocks away from the largest housing project in New England. So I mean, it's a really expensive place to live. I don't live in Charlestown. I mean, we live in Revere, which is a couple of towns away, and can be kind of a nightmare to get here. Sometimes depending on traffic and rush hour and stuff, because we are in the city. Just because I can't, I'm with you. I can't afford to live in Charlestown, so it's tough, and so I totally see where I get where you're coming from. We look at this, and we do a similar thing. We have a men's breakfast once a month on a Saturday morning, and I pick up one of our guys. I call him our chef, and we cook a ton of bacon. We have some eggs, and then we do a short devotion. I mean, it's and I'm okay with that. Like, judge me if you will. I'm kidding, but we do a short devotion, probably like 5-10 minutes. But it's really designed, really to build relationships amongst the guys, because we do have community groups that meet during the week, and that's really where we do our heavy lifting. I mean, men's breakfast is really kind of designed. Just for the guys, the men of the church to get together. We talk sports, we talk all kinds of stuff. We eat, and then we play ping pong. Don's been to one.
Yep.
Like ping pong at my church is a serious thing.
While we were upstairs, while Eric was giving me the tour of the church, I heard this, and it was like, what was that? And it was somebody just won ping pong.
Yeah, he broke his 16-game losing streak, and yes, we keep track. Like, it's like ping pong at my church among the guys is pretty intense. But it's fun. But you say that, but that's become kind of a fun thing that we do. Like, we literally every church event that we have, we end up at the ping pong table, like laughing and goofing around.
Yeah,
so
we have a foosball down in the children's area, and like everybody's already talking about like how can we restore this thing, how can we fix it, because that's it. That's gonna be a focal point for people.
We have a foosball table, a pool table, and a ping pong table, and I think I've taken the cover off the pool table twice. Like, we literally play ping pong all the time. It is. I have no idea why. Like, it's just turned into like the thing, but it's kind of fun.
I could see though if you did a men's night on like a Friday night, maybe put the local. I know we can't say the names, but put the local baseball team on, since we're in that season. Put it on the radio and
Yeah, we have some fun.
Yeah, that would be.
We'd have a good time. But yeah, no, I like what you say. We do a ladies' night too. That's about as far as it goes. Like, that's the extent of my knowledge on ladies' night is I show up once a month on a Tuesday when Sarah, my wife, leads it, and I do heavy lifting. Like, I get the tables out, I get stuff down from the cabinet she can't reach. I let her order me around in the kitchen, so it's kind of like being at home. And then I run out of here as fast as I physically can, because I have no idea. I have like no idea what they do here, but I know that it's girly stuff that I probably don't want to be around for. So
usually with me, I'm in my office finishing up sermon slides and notes. And
yours is on a Saturday though, right?
Yeah.
So like I said, mine is on a Tuesday night. And so what I generally do is I take my kids out and we go eat half-price wings. And it's kind of a fun night for us. So, anyway, man, we've digressed big time. So.
Yeah, we've done the rabbit hole. So Eric, you do this thing called the Journey.
I do.
And that's why we're really here. I'm what is the Journey, and what does that mean for First Church?
So let me give you a little background. So we planted a church in Washington State in 2011, and it was a long story how we got there, which we're not going to go into today. But God did something awesome. I mean, that's really all I can say. Like, to risk sounding like I'm giving my resume, but we started off with like 7 people in July of 2011, and we were getting in my living room, and we were getting. I mean, there was times we had 40 and 50 people at our house. And so we planted a church with, and the running joke was, the mystery to planting churches was play really loud music, have a pastor who yells, have no systems, no organization whatsoever, and people show up. And that sounds fun, but we started July of 2011. Our core team was 7 people. By December of 2012, we were running 140, which is, and we were in a rural suburban community, a little bigger than where you're at. So that's insane. I mean, that's literally, we were affiliated with Baptist Convention out there, and we were in our region. We were one of the larger Baptist churches, and we were like 14 months old. So number one, it's bad for the ego. It's good for if you want to feed your ego, it's good, but long term, it's bad for your ego. Mm-hmm. But I learned very quickly that explosive growth is awesome. I mean, everybody wants it until you've experienced explosive growth, and then you realize very quickly that you're just not ready. We didn't have leaders. We had people who were becoming believers, and by necessity, were thrust into roles within a couple months, because we just, when you grow like that, you have to have people leading ministries, because man, listen, my skill set does not include counseling very, very well. It doesn't include a lot of the touchy-feely personal kind of stuff. Like it's just you guys, if you're listening, you don't know me that well. I'm not a very emotional person. I mean, I grew up playing sports and then joined the military, which doesn't really design you to be like touchy-feeling, happy and rainbows and unicorns and sunshine and
all the fun stuff.
I'm a lot more doom and gloom. But so we realized. So in retrospect, one of the things we learned is we didn't really we had a process, so to speak, but not really. My issue, and this isn't my like the angry church planner, I'm going to do it better, you all are morons kind of idea. That's not the case. But processes in churches are great. I've seen a lot of churches with great processes. The issue is a lot of times it devolves into checking the box. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, you've been to this class, so you're good. Okay, you've been to this class, so you're good. And it doesn't actually become a discipleship process, so to speak. As more, it comes a checking the block, checking the block process.
Right. Like one thing that might happen is people do the class, but then they forget what they learned. So when the process comes to, hey, can you disciple the next person? They're sitting there like,
or you have a growth class, because like we did a membership class, a growth class, a ministry class, whatever. And then so as long as you've been through the ministry class, like you were allowed to lead a ministry. Well, just because you sat through a class doesn't mean you know anything. I mean, like there's one thing between knowing something and being able to actually do it. So that was kind of my issue with that. And after I'd stepped down to be ready to move here to Boston, it was one of the things that God really laid on my heart, and God really, my wife and I, Sarah and I as well, we were like, we didn't do a good job of discipling people and stuff like that. And so and I had a good friend who was a pastor back in Washington. We kind of talked about this too. So I had one of those giant whiteboards, and my wife's a saint for dealing with this, but I had one of those giant whiteboards that was in my house, in my living room. Like my wife let me, leave it up in the living room, which, right. Anybody who's married is like, your wife lets you put a 6-foot whiteboard in your living room? She let me. It led to some contentious times on occasion, but, she was a good sport. I set it on top. I had a desk in the living room, and I would spend hours kind of constructing this, thinking through things, erasing stuff. I have pictures saved on my, in my thing for years. Anyway, so what we do with the journey is what we decided, talking to my buddies, the biggest issue we have with so many of these processes, it's me grabbing you and dragging you from step to step to step to step, which sometimes in discipleship that's the case, but at the same time, if we're truly saved, if we're truly transformed by the Holy Spirit, well, then part of us, we want to grow spiritually. And then sometimes it can't be as neat and as clean as A to B to C to D. Sometimes it gets kind of messy in the middle of it. So we developed this thing. We called it the Journey, and I like the idea of the Journey because I always think of stuff like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or any of those like big epic. I mean, maybe if you're fancier than I am, insert Shakespeare play here. Like that's not really my thing.
turn off if you're thinking Twilight.
Yeah. If you're thinking Twilight, it's probably not the place for you. But the idea of the hero's journey, it's a very typical literary thing. The idea of the hero's journey is you watch this guy go from, for instance, I like to use Luke Skywalker because he's, it's just easy. He's a whiny teenager. Like he is. He's a whiny, annoying teenager who becomes a Jedi Master. Like helps take down like the evil empire by himself. I mean, like really. But we watch the movie, and ultimately when you read these, when you do these, we all know how it's going to end in a way. The good guy's eventually going to triumph. Like we know that. But what we read the book for, what we watch the movies, we look for the hero's journey. We look to see how the character develops over time, and the author does that to try to drag you in, that you go, oh, I can identify with this guy. Right. So the reason we called it the journey was we're more interested in the process, because as believers, we know how the story ends. We end in eternity with Jesus. So, well, what about between now and then? And so the journey is this idea that you take this hero's journey from here to eternity and following God and glorifying Him in your life and doing everything you can to grow closer to Him until that time happens.
Right.
So what we talk about in the journey is we base it off of a couple small things. First of all, we talk about the 4 C's, and so alliteration's a great word. If you didn't do well on your SATs, it just means that I use the same letter for it. And so we say, are you converted? Are you consecrated? Are you called? And are you committed? Right? And so what does that mean? Well, are you converted? Do you know Jesus? Have you become a believer? Are you consecrated? So that's the big word, right? And so the consecrated is, are you growing spiritually? Are you becoming more and more like Jesus every single day? And inside that, we use 6 practices: read, pray, give, gather, serve, and tell. Right? And I know I'm going fast, but we'll probably have to type something up. So how do you grow spiritually? You read your Bible. If you read your Bible, what are you going to do? You're going to pray, because the Bible talks about praying. It teaches you. Like, it all comes back to the Bible. I mean, really, if the Bible's not the basis of anything, we don't know. You read, you pray, you give. And that's the one that people struggle with, right? We give financially. We talk about stewardship, right? So we talk about stewardship, and it's not just giving financially, which is part of it, but it's also time, talent, treasures, all of those things, and which is also serving. You serve your church any way you can. You gather with your church body on Sundays, and you gather in a community group, that you can grow and be discipled. You serve in your church, you do something, and then finally you share the gospel with people, you find opportunities. And of course, I'm doing this very quickly. But the whole idea of the journey, and then of course, what you called, were you called to serve, what are you called, and are you committed to being part of our church? So the biggest thing of the journey is we talk about commitments, and we have three areas of commitment that we see people to be involved in. And so to begin the journey, you have to be someone who's committed to attend, which just means that you regularly attend Sunday mornings. That's it. You regularly attend Sunday mornings. And then the next big thing that we talk about in the journey is we talk about always what your next step is, which I think is something that I think it's important for us. It's important for us to understand that we've never arrived. Right. I'm the pastor. I'm the guy who's supposed to lead this thing, and I haven't. I tell people I haven't arrived. I mean, I'm not. But of course, that's
everybody thinks we've arrived, but
you've got it all together, Pastor. Right? Your kids are. I mean, oh my gosh! No. My life's easily as screwed up as everybody else's.
I embarrassed my dad more times than I care to admit to.
So anyways, with that, so we say, well, what is your next step? Because that's what's important. It's because everybody's next step is different. We can't just say, well, this is the path that I've taken. Now, yes, of course, you have to believe in Jesus. You have to grow spiritually. Like that's the same for everybody. But how God transforms you and how God transforms me might be very, very different. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like really. And so we really have to be honest about that. So we would say, well, what's your next step? And then we have next steps laid out. Well, if you regularly attend and you say, well, what's my next step? We go, well, there's a couple. But a very obvious one is, are you involved in a community group? Do you have a mentor? Are you being discipled? Well, there's the next easy step. Well, if you're a new believer, have you been baptized? Right? So that's kind of your next easy step, right? And so you would go from committed to attend to committed to community. See how that, that way it's just
More
easier.
alliteration.
It's just easy to memorize. So when you say you're committed to community, you're involved in a community group, right? So, and this is I think this is kind of where we do things a little differently, and I'm okay with that. We do formal church membership. I know that's not always a thing nowadays. I mean, some people are like, but we do formal church membership. We find that to be important. So we don't ever advertise our membership class on Sunday morning. Never. I never advertise it. Because how our church is structured, how the journey is structured, is that you have to be involved in a community group to be a member.
Yep.
You have to be, like, even so that's kind of part of what we talk about is you have to be involved in a community group to be a member. So the only time that we talk about membership classes, we share it with our community groups. Hey, listen, I'm gonna, we have some new folks showing up, and so that's the case. And we're honest with people. Hey, listen, I'm gonna talk about you to your community group leader and hear what they have to say. So, make sure that and so you have to be committed to community. What do we mean by that? You attend regularly, you participate, and listen, I get that there's some people who are more outgoing, who are more chatty than others.
Yep.
But basically what we mean is you don't sit in the corner and play on your phone and don't engage anybody. Like that's what we would say is not committed to community. So are you committed to community? And so the next step would be committed to covenant membership. And we call it covenant membership. We call our church members church family members, but are you committed to membership? And so that next step is, in order to be a member, you have to be part of a community group, you have to commit to a ministry, and you have to commit to give. Because those are, and listen, I'm not reinventing the wheel. The Bible's clear on that, right? The church is a body. And if you're not involved in ministries the way God has gifted you, then you're not part of the body. You're sitting in a pew, you're taking up space. Now, do we give allowance for, listen, I'm in a season of life, I have some stuff going on, I can't commit to ministry right now? I mean, of course, but it's more about trajectory necessarily than it is just, checking off a box. Like, if we had someone who's like, hey, listen, I just had twins, I can't really be super involved in ministry right now. Okay, you have newborn twins, and I'm like, hey, I get that, right? But it's one of the things we have to we have to be honest with people about, and so it's a brief. And so what we do with the journey is I think a lot of times people come into church and they go, well, how do I get involved? Like I don't know how to get involved. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know what to do. And I think we do a lot of insider language in the church. We do a lot of I don't know. You've been to churches where you show up and there's no signs. There's no nothing anywhere.
Yep.
And people just come in and they're doing stuff, and you're like, where do I take my kids? Where do I?
It's the biggest confusion.
Where's the bathroom? I mean,
that was First Baptist.
That was First Church.
Yeah.
I mean, we put signs up now. I mean, if you come in our front door, you see we have signs. So anyway, so what we kind of see the journey as like a signage. Like it's our signage to be like, hey, go this direction. Hey, move that direction. But it's just kind of a move in your direction. We go, well, what's your next step? And if you go, I don't want to take my next step. Okay, then don't take your next step. But, understand that's where you are, and that's where you are right now.
Yep.
But the dream is that you would, continue the journey and grow spiritually. The biggest thing was, because we say that discipleship is from conversion to glorification. And so those of you guys who aren't big seminarians, it's from the time you meet Jesus until you meet Jesus, right? It's from when you become a believer until you go to heaven and meet Jesus again. So that's kind of our our pithy little thing. But and that's one of those things where I'm working hard on that. I don't know, I haven't announced it formally to anybody, but I am actually working on making the journey into a book. So I got a couple chapters I've gotten done, so hopefully I'm hoping
you heard it here first.
Well, I'm going to finish it by the end of the summer. I'm not saying it'll be out then, but I'm hoping to have it finished and just to have a resource for guys. And it's it's not one of those I'm not like, hey, this is how we do the journey. You have to do it like us.
Right.
Like I'm one of those, hey, this is how we do the journey. Learn from us,
yep.
And then
and that
implement it.
And that's one thing that I think a lot of churches end up having a struggle with is they try to develop their own discipleship program based on what this person and that person, and Andy Stanley's got a good thing here, and Matt Chandler's got a good thing here, and it's like I've seen churches where the pastor every 6 months is changing, like because
he went to a new conference,
and it gets tiring after a while, and
then your people are like, well, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. What are we doing?
Yeah,
that's the problem, is that you confuse your people, because they're like, well, last month we did this month we do this.
So discipleship is something important. One thing I was given advice from a good friend of mine was, if you're in a revitalization right now and you're sitting there, you want to start something, really start with a community group. Get to know your people. Get to know where they're at. Then also pray. Seek God. Break open your Bible. Those are your two most important sources right there, prayer and the Bible. And then just let the Holy Spirit start to talk to you. Like you heard Eric, how he started to develop the journey. We're starting to develop stuff at First Baptist. It isn't always going to be. We live in a society, it's cookie cutter, it's fast food, want it your way right away. It's not going to work that way. Every church, just like, we look at the Bible, and the Bible calls the church the body. Every body is different because it's made with different believers who are on different paths. You have some people that are way low on the in their walk, and people that are way high. Get to know your people, get to develop something, and once you have something developed, it's going to work for anybody coming into your congregation.
I think that's important I think it's important to understand, is that we want to look for the cookie cutter, because the issue is we want that quick growth. We want the magic bullet. We want to be like, well, hey, Matt Chandler did this. Hey, so-and-so did this. Hey, Andy Stanley this. Or, Life Church does it. Or we see all these things, and we go, well, it worked for them, so it's got to work for me. And there's a lot of pastors who make a lot of money doing that as well. And I think the issue with that is you're not Andy Stanley. You're not Matt Chandler. You're not any of these guys. Like, God has uniquely equipped you and called you to your ministry context. And you have to understand your ministry context, and you have to live in your ministry context, and you have to serve in your ministry context, and you have to understand how God has equipped you and how God has developed you for who you are, for where you're at.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're in Charlestown. What works in Charlestown isn't going to work, 2 cities over. Isn't going to work. I mean, we're in Boston. I mean, Boston, if you're not familiar with the Boston area, it's a conglomerate of little communities and towns and neighborhoods that all have their own kind of unique culture.
I'm a Bostonian in the fact that I was born in West Roxbury, but I am not one of these townies here. And I know that some people are going to think that I just got derogatory, but that's what we call people from Charlestown. We call them townies.
That's what people from Charlestown call people from Charlestown.
And so when I'm saying that, I'm saying it as a Bostonian. I'm like Paul, where Paul says, I am a Pharisee of Pharisees. I am a Bostonian of Bostonians, but my culture, living, having been in West Roxbury, is not the same culture that's in Charlestown.
Right. And you have to earn your townie cred in Charlestown.
Yes.
Like I'm not from here, and so I can't go buy a townie hoodie and wear it around, because like I'm not a townie. Like, it's just and that's what I'm talking about. You have to understand your ministry context. You have to understand who the people are that you're serving, that you're ministering to, and then you have to understand that. Now, listen at me and don't hear my words. Don't change the gospel. Don't any of that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm saying methodologically reflect your community. Find a way to reach your community, which is going to be unique. What works for us in Charlestown isn't going to work
in Sutton.
A to A, B to B, it is not going to work. Now, can you glean principles from what we're doing and go, hey, that's a good idea. How can I implement that idea in my context.
Yep.
Like that's the problem. And I think that's the problem that we do sometimes, is that we go to these conferences. Well, I'm not a big conference guy. We have that conversation all the time.
Yeah.
Don goes to conferences.
I do.
I read blogs. Yeah, I'm not, and read books. I'm not a huge conference guy, but and you go hear these guys, and it's like they say, "Hey, do this, do that," and it's almost like, well, if I just do what he's doing, I'm going to have a church of 1,000 people like that guy is. Well, maybe, or probably not, though.
When you say that, I think there's a Gospel Coalition video out there with Matt Chandler, and he's talking with Mark Deaver and Kevin DeYoung, and they're talking about, like, well, what's the size of your church and what's the biblical size of the church? And even Chandler is blown away by what Village Church became, but at the same time, and you mentioned this in the last podcast, and we're going to actually get into this in another episode, but Village Church has decided it is no longer going to be multi-site. They've decided, Chandler came to that biblical decision that it was not right for them to be this multi-site church. They're going to have autonomous churches built out of those campuses, and he will be the pastor of Village Church, but Village Church is going to be the one in, I believe it's Flower Mound. So that is going to be Village Church, and these other campuses are going to be whatever those bodies decide to call themselves.
Right.
But that is where he's reached, and I mean, his discipleship, everything, we tend to think when we do something. I just look at my own church right now, and the people there, they thought we'd be 300 people right now. It's funny, the vision I cast for them, they thought, oh, it's going to be 300 people. That isn't the thing. I mean, my thing is, I believe totally in the parable of the talents. God gave 5 talents to one servant, gave 2 to the other, gave 1 to the other. The 2 servants that had the 5 and 2, they doubled those. They invested. To me, that means as a pastor, you invest time and energy and resources into your congregation. And like you said, those people are going to then go and ask and say, hey, why don't you come to church? That's where people come to church nowadays, is when you invite them. That's the biggest thing. You can go on a Sunday and invite somebody to church, and they're going to go to church.
Right.
It's not like I remember speaking of conferences, going to a conference, and the pastor that was there said, the days of, we're building this church and people are going to come in to that church, that's gone. We're living in a post-Christian age now. And so discipleship is going to become something bigger, something that is going to become more necessary for every church, if we're just gonna survive.
Well, what I shared before is that we planted a church, and we were, even when we weren't attempting to be, we were attractional. It's a church plant. Like, you're gonna get low hanging fruit. You're gonna get people like, what's going on here? And in a replant, we don't necessarily get that. And in our context in New England, we don't really get that. People just like, hey, I'm gonna go to church this morning. I mean, that's not really a thing. And so you really have to invite people. It has to be a personal, hey, why don't you come to my church with me, kind of thing. And not just it's, I say it's one of my favorite movies. I think too many churches get in this like Field of Dreams mindset, that if you build it, they'll come. Oh, if we just do it, people will just come. Mm-hmm. And it's not true. I mean, that's not the case. I mean, yes, God does whatever he wants. He draws who he draws, and we can do the semantics of that, but it doesn't take away our personal responsibility. And God draws who he draws, but he uses us to do it. He gives us the privilege and the responsibility to share the gospel with people, to invite people to come to our church. Right. So, yeah. So that's what we do. But like anything else, it's a work in progress. We're chugging along, and we've seen some. We've seen some good, some kind of good fruit from what we've done as far as discipleship in the journey, and we have people getting excited about ministry and wanting to serve and wanting to kind of be part of stuff. So it's been good.
All right. Well, that's about going to wrap it up for this episode 2 of the Practical Church Revitalization Podcast, and we will see you. The Practical Church Revitalization Podcast is sponsored by Overseed. Overseed's vision is to see growing historic churches in every New England town reaching their communities for Christ. If you want to be part of a mentorship program and you live in the New England area, please go to overseed.org and find out how you can get in contact with one of the hub churches in the area or one of the many pastoral network cohorts that are run in the area. Once again, go to overseed.org for more information on the Overseed Network.